Blackout Nation. Written by Scott Medbury. Narrated by Adam Barr. Episode 4. On the Move. Chapter 1. Stealth. Sarah checked her watch in the dim light of the medical school break room. 9:57 p.m. Time to move. She'd let everyone rest as long as possible, but the darkness wouldn't last forever. Outside, the city was pitch black. No streetlights, no house lights, nothing but occasional fires burning in the distance. Jake emptied their gathered supplies onto the break room table, sorting them into piles with military precision. "Everyone takes water and food first," he said quietly. "Then medical supplies, spread across multiple packs in case we get separated." Maya unfolded a sheet of paper where she'd sketched the surrounding streets. She'd added detailed notes about patrol patterns, marked with times and numbers of men. "They're most active between midnight and 4 a.m., she whispered. "But I've noticed gaps in their coverage, here and here." She pointed to 2 intersections they'd need to cross. Her fingers traced along a side street. "The patrols spend more time on the main roads looking for survivors trying to escape. These alleys, they barely check them." "Smart girl," Rebecca said, adjusting her borrowed backpack. Her hands shook slightly as she tightened the straps, but her voice was steady. "I never would have thought to track their patterns like that." "In Aftermath, you learn to study NPC patrol routes," Maya explained. "The best loot is always in the most heavily guarded areas, so you have to—" She broke off as distant gunfire echoed through the building. Everyone froze. Devon pressed against Sarah's side, his small fingers gripping her shirt. She could feel him trembling. "It's far away," she assured him, though she had no way of knowing for sure. "We're safe here." 3 blocks east," Maya said confidently. "Single burst, probably just warning shots. They do that sometimes, to scare people into staying inside." She pulled a small notebook from her pocket, flipping through pages of careful observations. "They've been doing it every hour, on the hour. Keeps people scared." Jake raised an eyebrow at her assessment, but didn't argue. He handed out the weapons they'd acquired: the guard's rifle for himself, the Glock for Sarah, a baseball bat for Pete. Rebecca and Maya would carry their packs, ready to run while the others provided cover if needed. The weight distribution had been carefully planned. No one too heavy to run, no one too light to help if they needed to fight. "Remember the route," Jake said, tracing it on Maya's map. "If we get split up, head for the Valley Street Bridge. That's our target. Wait no more than 30 minutes there, then proceed alone if you have to." He looked each of them in the eye. "Everyone clear? And remember, no lights, no noise. Hand signals only once we're outside." They nodded. Sarah watched Devon square his small shoulders, trying to look brave despite his fear. Rebecca knelt beside him, adjusting his backpack straps. She'd insisted on carrying most of his share of the supplies, leaving him with just water and a few energy bars. "Stay close to me, sweetie," she whispered. "I'll keep you safe while your aunt watches our backs, just like we practiced." More gunfire, closer this time. Multiple weapons. Someone screamed, a sound of pain rather than fear. Sarah's combat instincts kicked in, analyzing the firefight. At least 3 distinct weapons, probably an ambush rather than a patrol engagement. "Time to go," Jake said, shouldering his pack. He moved to the door, rifle ready. "Sarah, you've got rear guard. Everyone else between us. Maya, right behind me. We'll need your eyes." Sarah did a final check of her weapon while the others formed up. The familiar weight of the Glock was reassuring, but she hoped she wouldn't need it. 8 rounds left in the magazine, 1 spare. Not enough for a prolonged fight. She touched the combat medic insignia she still wore around her neck. a habit that had become almost a prayer. Devin looked back at her as they prepared to move out. In the dim light, his eyes were wide, but determined. Sarah gave him what she hoped was a confident smile. He managed a small smile back, then turned to focus on Rebecca's back, just as they'd practiced during their brief rest. "Ready?" Jake breathed. They nodded. "On me. 3, 2, 1. The darkness swallowed them as they emerged from the medical school's side entrance. Sarah blinked, letting her eyes adjust to the near-total blackness. The air felt different out here, thick with smoke from distant fires, carrying the metallic tang of violence. Jake led them along the building's wall, his rifle held ready, but not raised. His free hand moved in precise gestures. Forward, slow, stay tight. The group responded as one, pressing close to the rough brick. Maya stayed right behind him, her eyes constantly scanning, while Pete brought up the middle with Devin and Rebecca. Sarah watched their backs, the Glock a comfortable weight in her hands. A soft clatter made them all freeze. Down the street, a cat darted between abandoned cars, knocking over a glass bottle. The sound seemed deafening in the unnatural quiet. Jake held up his fist. Wait. 10 heartbeats later, he signaled forward again. Devin stumbled slightly on a piece of debris. Rebecca caught him before he could fall, steadying him with practiced hands. The boy didn't make a sound. They'd practiced being quiet during their rest, turning it into a game. Now, it wasn't a game anymore. The growl of an engine shattered the silence. Jake's hand shot up. Freeze. The sound grew louder, accompanied by the sweep of headlights. Sarah's heart hammered as she recognized the distinctive rumble of one of Marcus's modified Humvees. Jake gestured sharply. Doorway, now. They pressed into the recessed entrance of what had been a coffee shop, Sarah pulling Devin against her chest. The vehicle approached slowly, its lights probing the darkness. Through the dirty windshield, Sarah could make out 2 figures. The passenger held something that looked like night vision goggles. Rebecca's breathing quickened. Sarah squeezed her arm, willing her to stay calm. The Humvee crawled past their hiding spot, close enough that Sarah could smell diesel fumes. Devin trembled against her, but didn't make a sound. The vehicle stopped, 30 feet ahead. The passenger door opened with a creak. "Thought I saw something," a gruff voice said. "Probably another fucking cat," his companion replied. "We've been chasing shadows all night." "Marcus said check everything." Sarah's finger tightened on the Glock's trigger. Beside her, she felt Jake shift his weight, preparing for a fight. Rebecca pressed herself deeper into the shadows, pulling Maya with her. Pete's hand gripped the baseball bat, his knuckles white in the darkness. A flashlight beam swept the street, getting closer to their doorway. Sarah felt Devin press harder against her, his face buried in her shirt. The beam touched the edge of their hiding spot, and she held her breath. 8 rounds in her magazine. The patrol had body armor. Bad odds. The light lingered for what felt like eternity, then moved on. "Nothing," the man muttered. "Just garbage and shadows." "Told you," his partner called from the vehicle. "Come on, we've got 6 more blocks to cover before shift change." Yeah. The passenger door slammed. "This whole sector's dead anyway. Nobody's stupid enough to be out here." The engine revved, and the Humvee pulled away, continuing its slow patrol down the street. They watched its taillights disappear around a corner, the sound of its engine fading into the night's ambient noise of distant fires and occasional gunfire. Jake waited another full 5 minutes before signaling them forward. They emerged from the doorway like ghosts, staying close to the buildings. Maya pointed to an alley, half a block ahead, their next waypoint. Jake held up his fist as they approached the intersection, and the group froze in the shadows. The abandoned gas station ahead was a problem. Its canopy created a large, open space they'd need to cross, with nowhere to hide. Even in the darkness, they'd be exposed. Maya tugged at Jake's sleeve, pointing. In the dim moonlight, 3 figures moved near the gas pumps. They were hunched over a car's fuel tank, a length of rubber hose hanging between them.
"It won't work,"
one whispered harshly.
"The power's dead. The pumps won't—"
"Shut up," another cut him off.
"The tanks are still full underground. We just need to—"
"You're both idiots," the third said.
"We should be looking for food, not—"
The argument died as a piece of debris crunched under Pete's boot. All 3 figures spun toward the sound. Metal glinted in their hands. A shotgun, a revolver, and something that looked like a machete.
"Who's there?"
The one with the shotgun called out, his voice shaking slightly.
"Show yourselves."
Jake raised the rifle instinctively, but Sarah touched his arm. She'd seen something in the way they moved, the way they held their weapons. These weren't Marcus's men. Just scared people, probably as hungry as they were. "Easy," she called softly, stepping forward with her hands raised. "We're just passing through. We don't want trouble."
"Stay back!"
The man with the revolver was young, probably barely out of his teens. His hand trembled as he aimed at them.
"We'll shoot!"
Devin whimpered softly behind her. Sarah kept her voice calm. "You're trying to get fuel, right? For a generator, maybe?" She slowly reached into her pack. "I've got something better. Medical supplies. Antibiotics." The 3 men exchanged glances. The one with the machete lowered his weapon slightly. "What kind of antibiotics?" "Amoxicillin and clean bandages." She held up the small bottle she'd taken from the hospital. "You've got people hurt, don't you? That's why you need the generator." The shotgun lowered a fraction.
"My sister,"
the man said quietly,
"cut herself trying to break into the pharmacy. It's infected."
"Let us cross," Sarah said, "and the medicine is yours." She glanced at Jake, who nodded almost imperceptibly. They could spare these supplies. They had more spread across their packs. The 3 men conferred in whispers. Finally, the one with the shotgun stepped aside. "Cross. Slowly. Leave the medicine by the pump." They moved across the open space one at a time. Sarah placed the bottle and bandages carefully on the ground as she passed. The young man with the revolver snatched them up quickly.
"Thank you,"
he muttered. As they reached the far side of the station, Sarah heard Devin whisper,
"Why did you help them? They were going to shoot us."
"Sometimes," she whispered back, "the best way to survive isn't by fighting. Sometimes it's by helping others survive, too." They melted back into the darkness, leaving the 3 men to their fuel siphoning attempt. Behind them, the argument had already resumed, but quieter now, tempered by the small victory of medical supplies. Maya pointed to their next waypoint, a dark alley that would take them closer to the bridge. As they moved out, Sarah caught Jake watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Respect, maybe. Or something more. The group pressed against a crumbling brick wall as another patrol passed by. They'd been pinned in this position for 20 minutes, watching Marcus's men move in overlapping patterns through the intersection ahead. 2 Humvees and at least 8 men on foot, all heavily armed.
"We're boxed in," Pete whispered. "They've got every approach covered." Maya shook her head, her eyes darting between the different patrol routes. Her lips moved silently as she counted seconds between each pass. Sarah recognized the intense focus she'd seen in combat veterans analyzing tactical situations.
"No," Maya breathed. "Look, they're making a mistake."
She pulled out her notebook, sketching quickly.
"The foot patrol thinks the Humvee is covering that corner, but they're off by almost 40 seconds. There's a gap."
Jake studied her diagram. "You're sure?"
"It's just like Aftermath's AI pathing. When you have multiple units, they don't coordinate perfectly.
She trailed off, counting under her breath as a Humvee passed.
"Now, the gap's starting."
Sure enough, the vehicle turned north while the foot patrol was still moving south. A 30-foot stretch of darkness opened up, completely uncovered.
"We've got 38 seconds," Maya whispered. "If we time it right, we can cross in groups of 2. They won't see us if we stay tight to that dumpster."
Jake watched another cycle, then nodded. "You call it." Maya's face lit up with fierce concentration. She waited until the next Humvee passed, counting softly.
"First pair. Now."
Jake and Pete darted across, vanishing into shadows. Maya counted 15 seconds, then sent Rebecca and Devon. Another perfect gap.
"Ready?"
she asked Sarah.
3, 2, 1.
They crossed together, Maya matching Sarah's movements perfectly. They made it just as headlights swept the street behind them.
"That was amazing,"
Pete said, but his praise was cut short by a sharp intake of breath. He'd landed awkwardly on a pile of debris during the crossing. Rebecca was already examining his ankle, her nurse's instincts taking over.
"Minor sprain," she whispered. "Let me wrap it."
While Rebecca worked, Jake touched Maya's shoulder. "That was solid tactical analysis. Where did you really learn to read patterns like that?" Maya looked down, suddenly shy.
"My dad. He was military. Before Russia, he used to let me watch him play war games. Said I had a good eye for strategy."
Her voice caught slightly.
"I always thought he was just being nice."
"He wasn't," Jake said firmly. "You've got natural talent. Keep watching. Keep analyzing. It'll keep us alive." Sarah watched Maya stand straighter, pride replacing uncertainty in her posture. Sometimes, Sarah thought, survival wasn't just about physical strength. Sometimes it was about seeing patterns in chaos, about finding order in a broken world. Pete tested his newly wrapped ankle, nodding thanks to Rebecca. Maya was already studying their next movement, her confidence growing with each successful prediction. They had 4 more blocks to cover before the bridge, 4 more blocks of patrols and patterns, of gaps and shadows. They'd made good progress since leaving the medical school, covering nearly 2 miles through Marcus's patrol grid. The bridge was close now. Sarah could see its dark silhouette against the starlit sky, maybe half a mile ahead. They'd managed to avoid the worst of the patrols by following Maya's predicted patterns, but their luck couldn't last forever.
"Down."
Jake's whispered command sent them diving into the doorway of an abandoned convenience store. Sarah heard boots on broken glass, a patrol coming up the side street they'd just left. No time for subtlety. She shouldered the door open, and they piled inside. The store's interior was black as pitch. Sarah felt her way forward, one hand on Devon's shoulder, guiding him past fallen shelves and scattered merchandise. Her boot crunched on something, probably months-old potato chips.
"Back room," Pete breathed. "Behind the counter."
A flashlight beam cut through the front window. Sarah pushed Devon toward Maya, drawing her Glock. Jake took position beside her, rifle trained on the door.
"In here,"
Maya whispered, barely audible.
"Quick."
Sarah heard the others moving into what must have been the storeroom. Jake touched her arm. Stay or go? She shook her head. They needed someone to watch the entrance. The patrol's voices grew closer. Spread too thin, someone was saying. Can't cover every— Shut up! Another voice cut him off. Check that store. Sarah's finger tightened on the trigger. If they came in— A radio crackled outside. Sarah 2, report position. Checking grid 7-3, came the response. No sign of— Belay that! Marcus wants everyone at the bridge, now. Sir, we haven't finished— He's pulling everyone back to defensive positions. Says they're too close to getting out of the perimeter. Direct quote, I want every exit locked down by dawn. Now move your ass. Copy that. Sierra 2 en route. The flashlight beam disappeared. Boots crunched away into the darkness. Sarah waited until the sound faded completely before relaxing her grip on the Glock. Her hands were trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the effort of holding completely still for so long. Clear, she whispered. The storeroom door creaked open. Maya emerged first, still holding Devon's hand. The boy's face was wet with silent tears, but he hadn't made a sound. Rebecca and Pete followed, both pale, but composed. They're abandoning the grid search, Jake said quietly, falling back to defensive positions. The bridge, Sarah agreed. They know that's where anyone trying to escape would have to cross. Which means that's exactly where we're headed, Pete said grimly. Sarah saw Maya already sketching in her notebook, probably mapping the new patrol patterns they'd need to avoid. Devon pressed against her side, seeking comfort she wasn't sure she could provide. They'd avoided detection by luck and skill, but the bridge, that would be different. Marcus would have his best men there, waiting. We should move, Jake said. 2 hours until dawn. There, Jake had whispered, pointing to a derelict warehouse near the bridge approach. We need to rest and study the bridge before attempting the crossing. Now Sarah crouched in the warehouse office, Devon dozing against her shoulder. Through gaps in the boarded windows, she could see the Valley Street Bridge stretching across the river like a skeletal giant. Marcus's men had fortified both ends with overturned vehicles and makeshift barriers. Even in the pre-dawn darkness, she could make out at least 5 armed figures moving between the defensive positions. 2-man teams at each barricade, Sarah said, plus another on foot patrolling the bridge. They look dead on their feet. The shift change must be overdue. Through his scope, Jake watched one of the guards stifle a yawn. Graveyard shift. They've been up since yesterday on high alert. Now they're just waiting for their relief to show. He lowered the rifle, turning to the others. The bridge's support structure could give us cover, Jake continued, keeping his voice low. Especially if we time it right, just before their relief shows up, when they're at their most tired and distracted. Is everyone up for one last push? Pete tested his bandaged ankle, wincing slightly. No going back now. How long until dawn? Rebecca asked, helping Devon sip from their dwindling water supply. Maybe 40 minutes, Jake replied. We move in 10. Sarah felt Maya tense beside her. The girl pointed to something through the window, movement in the shadows beneath the bridge. Someone else was out there, watching, waiting. Chapter 2. The Bridge. Sarah inched closer to the grimy window, squinting at the movement beneath the bridge. 3 figures darted between the massive concrete supports, their movements erratic, nervous. Not Marcus's men, Jake whispered. Too unorganized, hesitant. I think they're kids. Teenagers. Through a gap in the boards, Sarah watched them huddle together, gesturing at each other, clearly arguing about which way to go. Even at this distance, she could tell they were young and clearly scared.
They'll get themselves killed,
Pete muttered, shifting his weight off his injured ankle.
or get us all killed,
Rebecca added, her arm protectively around Devon. Jake studied them through his scope. 2 boys, 1 girl, basic weapons, baseball bat, maybe a knife. They've been watching, trying to work up the courage to cross. He lowered the rifle. But they might be useful. Whatever they do will draw attention, maybe create a disturbance while we cross underneath. Sarah watched the teenagers' movements, the hesitation, the fear, but also the determination that kept them from retreating into the city.
We should help them. They're just kids.
We can't save everybody, remember? Sarah did indeed remember, all too clearly. Jake checked his watch. I expect a guard change in less than half an hour. We need to move now, get into position under the bridge. Those teenagers will make their attempt soon. They know dawn's coming, same as we do. Whatever happens, we'll be ready to take advantage of it.
And if they get caught?
Rebecca asked softly. Jake met her eyes. Then we use that distraction. Sarah touched Devon's shoulder.
Stay close to Rebecca. Pete, how's the ankle?
It'll hold. He tested his weight on it.
Getting better.
They gathered their packs, moving silently through the warehouse. Jake led them past abandoned forklifts and scattered pallets to the loading dock. Its rusted door already stood open. Beyond it, the bridge's massive support structure loomed ahead, a maze of concrete and steel that could either hide them or trap them. Maya went first, her small frame slipping easily through the gap. Pete followed, then Rebecca and Devon. Sarah watched through the door as they crossed the open ground between the warehouse and the bridge, each using the shadows of abandoned vehicles for cover. Jake touched her arm. Ready? She nodded, though her heart was pounding. The bridge seemed impossibly exposed now that they were about to attempt it. But the darkness wouldn't last forever, and Marcus's men would be more alert after the shift change. They emerged into the pre-dawn air, staying low as they moved between rusted cars. The teenagers were somewhere ahead in the darkness, hidden by the bridge's concrete supports. Sarah could only hope their presence would help, rather than hinder. The river whispered beneath them as they reached the first pylon, the sound masking their footsteps on the gravel. Above, the guards' boots scraped on the bridge deck, but the noise seemed distant, removed from their world down here in the shadows. Sarah pressed her back against the cool concrete, feeling the rough surface through her shirt. The others were barely visible now, dark shapes in the deeper darkness under the bridge. Ahead lay 200 feet of exposed underbelly, with only the support structure for cover. Jake signaled silently. Time to move. The concrete pylons offered cover every 30 feet, but the gaps between felt endless. Sarah counted her steps as they moved. Stay low, stay quiet, stay alive. Above them, boots scraped on metal as the guards continued their patrol. Jake held up his fist, and they froze. A spotlight swept the riverbank behind them. Devon pressed against Sarah's leg, trembling but silent. They waited until the beam moved on before continuing. Halfway across now, Pete's breathing had grown ragged, his injured ankle clearly causing more pain than he'd admitted. Rebecca supported him silently, bearing some of his weight. A shout from above made them all drop instinctively into the shadows. The teenagers had chosen that moment to make their move, trying to slip past the barricade on the far side. "Stop right there!" A guard's voice, followed by the sound of running boots. More shouts. A spotlight swung wildly, searching the bridge deck. Sarah pulled Devon closer as running footsteps thundered overhead. The teenagers had scattered, causing confusion among the guards. "Watch the south side! They're heading back! Cut them off!" Jake signaled urgently. "Move now." They abandoned stealth for speed, rushing between the pylons while the chaos unfolded above. Pete stumbled, swearing under his breath, but Rebecca kept him upright. A gunshot cracked through the night. Then another. Sarah didn't look up, didn't let herself wonder about the teenagers' fate. They had their own survival to focus on. Maya reached the far bank first, finding a gap in the concrete where they could climb up. Jake helped boost her, then Devon. The sounds of pursuit were growing distant. The teenagers must have fled back toward the city. Sarah scrambled up next, turning to help Rebecca with Pete. His face was gray with pain as they hauled him over the edge. Just as they pulled him clear, a spotlight swept the area they'd just left. They lay flat in the scrubby grass, hardly daring to breathe. More gunfire echoed from the city side of the bridge, drawing the guards' attention back that way. "Move," Jake breathed, "before they regroup." They crawled through the grass until they reached a line of abandoned trailers. Only then did they risk standing, using the pre-dawn darkness for cover as they put distance between themselves and the bridge. Behind them, the guards' shouts grew fainter. The teenagers had given them the diversion they needed, though not in any way they'd planned. Sarah hoped they'd make it back to whatever shelter they'd come from. Devon tugged at her sleeve.
Did those kids... are they... They're fine, Sarah lied quietly. They knew what they were doing.
The eastern sky was starting to lighten. They needed to find shelter before full dawn exposed them to any patrols on this side of the river. At least they'd made it across. At least they were free of Marcus's immediate control. Jake pointed to a cluster of houses visible through the industrial zone. "We need to move. 10 minutes to get clear, then we find somewhere to hole up for the day." Sarah nodded, adjusting her pack. One last push before they could rest. One last stretch of darkness to keep them hidden. They moved out, staying close to whatever cover they could find, while behind them, the bridge's defenders slowly returned to their posts. The industrial district was a maze of loading bays and chain-link fences. They moved quickly, despite their exhaustion, Pete gritting his teeth against the pain in his ankle. The sounds from the bridge had faded, replaced by the hollow echo of their footsteps on broken pavement.
"There,"
Jake whispered, pointing through a gap between warehouses. A suburban development spread out beyond the industrial zone, rows of dark houses barely visible in the growing light.
"Those places will have basements, multiple exits. Most will have been looted by now,"
Maya said, studying the streets ahead.
"The ones closest to the industrial area would have been hit first."
Sarah nodded.
"We need to go deeper in, past where casual looters would bother checking."
"Smart," Jake agreed. "Looters work the edges, take what's easy. They don't go deep into residential areas. Too many houses to check, too exposed." They picked their way through a parking lot filled with abandoned trucks. Devon stumbled, nearly falling, and Sarah realized just how exhausted he was. They'd pushed hard all night, harder than any 8-year-old should have to. Rebecca pointed to a water tower rising above the houses.
"That's Oakwood Heights. Middle-class suburb. I had patients out here. Lots of families, big yards."
"Good sightlines," Jake added. "We can see anyone coming." The eastern sky was definitely lighter now, the darkness giving way to gray dawn. They needed to choose soon. 2 more blocks, Jake said, past where anyone desperate would have bothered searching. They moved faster, staying close to fences and hedges. The houses here were larger, set back from the street on sprawling lots. Many had security signs in their yards, useless now, but suggesting solid construction and good locks. Pete spotted it first, a 2-story colonial with a circular driveway, partially hidden by overgrown bushes. The windows were intact, the doors still secure. No signs of forced entry. "Perfect," Jake said. "Defendable position, multiple escape routes." He studied the neighboring houses. Far enough from other buildings to spot anyone approaching. Sarah saw Devon's eyes light up at the sight of the house. Real beds, real shelter. A moment of normalcy in their broken world. The sky was pale pink now, dawn creeping closer with each passing minute. They had to move.
"Let's check it out," Sarah said, "before we lose the darkness completely."
None of them saw the shadow moving behind the overgrown hedges. None of them noticed the territorial marks on the trees or the scattered bones partially hidden by leaves. The front lawn was overgrown, autumn leaves thick on the ground. Devon moved ahead eagerly despite his exhaustion, drawn by the promise of real beds and solid walls. Sarah watched him picking his way through the leaves, his small pack bouncing against his back. Jake was checking the perimeter, rifle ready. Maya had her notebook out, already mapping escape routes. Pete leaned against a tree, finally letting his exhaustion show, while Rebecca examined his ankle in the growing light.
"Devon, wait for us,"
Sarah called softly, but he was already halfway to the front steps. The attack came without warning. The dog burst from behind the hedges like a missile, a blur of matted fur and bared teeth. It was huge, some mix of German shepherd and something bigger, and it went straight for Devon.
"No!"
Sarah's scream tore from her throat as she sprinted forward, knowing she was too far away. Devon froze, his eyes wide with terror. The dog's muscles bunched as it prepared to leap, saliva dripping from yellow fangs. Sarah could see its ribs through its mangy coat. It had been surviving on whatever it could catch. A chain hung broken from its neck, suggesting it had once been someone's guard dog, now turned feral by hunger and abandonment. Jake's rifle came up, but the angle was wrong. Devon was between him and the dog. Maya screamed. Rebecca started forward, medical bag dropping from her shoulder. The dog launched itself at Devon's throat, powerful legs uncoiling like springs. Chapter 3. A Nick of Time. A shadow detached itself from the trees, moving impossibly fast. A man Sarah hadn't even seen there. He caught the dog in mid-leap, one arm wrapping around its chest while the other hand clamped its muzzle shut. They crashed to the ground together, rolling in the leaves. The dog thrashed violently, trying to turn on its attacker. But the stranger's grip was practiced, efficient. He shifted his weight, using his knee to pin the animal while maintaining control of its head. "Easy," the man said, his voice surprisingly gentle. "Easy now. Nobody needs to die here." His tone remained steady, calming, even as the dog struggled against his hold. Sarah reached Devon, pulling him into her arms. He was shaking violently, but unhurt. She felt his heart hammering against her chest as she checked him for injuries. The dog's struggles began to weaken. The stranger kept up a steady stream of soft words, never loosening his grip. Gradually, the animal's growls turned to whimpers. Its tail, which had been rigid with aggression, began to lower. Jake approached cautiously, rifle still raised. "Who are you?" The stranger looked up, and Sarah saw a weathered face, maybe 40 years old, with intelligent eyes and a neatly trimmed beard. Despite having just wrestled a wild dog, he seemed completely calm. His clothes were worn, but clean, and a well-maintained pack lay against the tree where he'd been watching them. "Name's Liam," he said, still keeping the dog restrained. "And I think maybe we can help each other." He glanced at their group, taking in their exhausted state. Pete's injury, the weapons they carried. "Did you come over the bridge? You look like you could use a safe place to rest." "I've got one." The dog had gone completely still now, submitting to Liam's control. The sun was rising behind them, casting long shadows across the leaf-strewn lawn. Jake kept his rifle trained on the man while the others debated in whispers. The whole situation was weird. The vicious dog sat calmly now, watching them all with amber eyes, responding to subtle touches on his neck.
I've got a place, maybe 10 minutes away. Secured, stocked, off the main roads,
Liam reiterated, perhaps sensing their reluctance. His eyes constantly scanned their surroundings as he spoke, moving in quick, practiced sweeps.
Why help us?
Sarah asked, still holding Devon close. Liam shrugged, the movement fluid, controlled.
Been watching the bridge for days, seeing who comes, who goes. You're the first group that looked worth approaching.
He patted the dog's head.
Besides, Kaiser here needs to learn not everyone's a threat. Kaiser? He's your dog? Found him 3 days ago, half-starved. Just needed a firm hand, didn't you, boy?
The dog's tail thumped once against the leaves.
Well,
Sarah's voice was tight.
You need to keep better control of him. Yes, you're right. He's still learning, said Liam. But I saved your boy before any harm was done, right?
Sarah kept her arm around Devon's shoulders protectively, but didn't answer him. The stranger shrugged.
Time's wasting,
he said, standing smoothly.
Patrols will be starting soon. Your call, but that ankle needs looking at properly.
He nodded toward Pete, who was barely keeping his feet.
And no offense, but the rest of you look buggered.
Jake lowered his rifle slightly and met Sarah's eyes. She nodded imperceptibly.
All right, lead the way, but no sudden moves.
Liam's smile didn't reach his eyes.
Wouldn't dream of it.
He retrieved his pack with his left hand, never letting go of Kaiser's collar with his right.
Stay close, stay quiet. I've marked the safe routes.
They followed him through yards, noting how he moved from cover to cover, always checking lines of sight before advancing. Kaiser padded silently beside him, completely obedient now. Sarah saw Maya studying Liam's movements, scratching notes in her book. The girl's usual chatter was absent. Something about their new companion had her on edge. Sarah, too, felt unease prickling her spine. Everything about Liam's movements, his watchfulness, reminded her of the criminals she'd dealt with in the ER, the ones who came in with knife wounds and eyes that never stopped moving. But right now, they needed shelter, needed rest, and sometimes survival meant taking risks. Finally, Liam came to a halt in front of a house and smiled widely at them.
Welcome home, he said.
The house looked ordinary from the outside, but inside told a different story. Liam had fortified doors and windows with scavenged materials, creating surprisingly effective barriers. Water jugs lined one wall, and Sarah spotted stacks of canned food through the kitchen doorway.
Home sweet home,
Liam said, letting Kaiser off his makeshift leash. The dog immediately took up position by the front window, watching the street.
Make yourselves comfortable. Been a while since I had guests.
Maya's eyes widened at the array of survival gear. Fishing line, hunting knives, even a compound bow propped in one corner.
Did you find all this stuff? Here and there,
Liam answered vaguely, though Sarah noticed his hand twitch slightly.
You'd be amazed what people left behind when they ran.
Rebecca was already treating Pete's ankle properly, using supplies from her pack. Maya sat nearby, pretending to write in her notebook while watching Liam's every move.
Kaiser,
Patrol, Liam commanded softly. The dog stood and began a circuit of the house, checking each room methodically. Amazing what they can learn with the right motivation. 3 days, you say? Sarah asked, remembering his early comment about finding the dog. She was extremely uncomfortable with the big dog prowling just feet from Devon. He's remarkably well trained for 3 days. Strange he would have attacked Devon if he's so disciplined, though. Don't you think? Liam's eyes flickered to her face, then away. Well, training takes a while. He must have just been excited by the movement. He moved to the kitchen. Anyone hungry? Got some soup warming. Where'd you come from? Jake asked, still standing, rifle held casually but ready. Before all this. Here and there, Liam said again. Moved around a lot. Never was one for settling down. He stirred something in a pot on a camping stove, his back to them. Worked construction mostly. Good skills for times like these. Sarah caught the slight hesitation before construction, saw how his shoulders tensed when Jake moved closer to check the street. Everything about him was just slightly off, like someone playing a role they hadn't quite mastered. This is so cool, Devon whispered, examining a row of fishing lures. Look, Aunt Sarah, he's got everything. Don't touch, buddy, Liam called without turning from the counter. His tone was friendly, but held an edge that Sarah didn't like. Kaiser finished his patrol and returned to Liam's side, sitting at perfect attention. Sarah had seen police dogs with less discipline. She watched Liam scratch the dog's ears, an affectionate gesture that somehow seemed practiced, like everything else he did. She came to an uncomfortable conclusion about the randomness of the dog attack. Soup's ready, he announced. Nothing fancy, but it's hot. Been a while since you all ate, I'm guessing. Maya finally spoke, her voice unusually quiet. How long were you watching us? Liam turned, ladling soup into scavenged bowls. His smile was perfect, practiced. I wasn't. I was just resting after a supply run. Didn't even hear you coming until Kaiser jumped. Right place, right time, I guess. He handed out the bowls. Eat up. You're safe here. Sarah met Jake's eyes across the room. They both felt the lie. But what was the truth? And more importantly, did they have any choice but to play along? Outside, the sun climbed higher, trapping them here until darkness returned. You should all get some rest, Liam said, cleaning the empty soup bowls with practiced efficiency. Kaiser and I have our routine. We'll keep watch. Thanks, Jake replied, but Sarah and I will keep watch. His tone was friendly but firm. Old habits. Something flickered behind Liam's eyes, there and gone in an instant. His movements became slightly less fluid, more mechanical. No need. Really, I've got this down to a science. Kaiser can smell anyone coming from a block away. All the same, Sarah said, checking her Glock while the others arranged sleeping spots in the living room. We prefer our own routine, too. Liam's hand tightened on the bowl he was drying. Don't trust me? His smile remained, but it had gone brittle at the edges. After I helped with the dog? Trust is earned, Jake said simply. You know how it is. Liam set the bowl down with exaggerated care. Right, of course. He whistled softly, and Kaiser padded to his side. We'll take the back of the house, then. Wouldn't want to crowd you. Sarah watched him disappear into the darkness of the rear rooms, Kaiser following silently. His footsteps were different now, harder, less controlled, with a hint of barely suppressed anger in each step. "You saw that?" she whispered to Jake once Liam was out of earshot. He nodded. "Guy's wound tight. Too tight. Like he's trying too hard to seem normal." They positioned themselves near the front windows, maintaining clear views of both the street and the hallway leading to the back rooms. Everyone else had finally succumbed to exhaustion, even Maya, though Sarah had seen her hesitate before closing her eyes. Devon had curled up close to Rebecca, his small face peaceful for the first time in hours. An hour passed in the tense silence. Occasionally they heard Liam moving in the back of the house, his footsteps interspersed with whispered conversations they couldn't quite make out. Sometimes it sounded like he was arguing with himself, his voice rising and falling in patterns that made no sense. Talking to the dog? Jake wondered quietly. Or himself, Sarah replied. She'd seen enough unstable patients to recognize the signs. Something's not right with him. The way he moves, the way he talks. It's like he's playing a part. Question is, what do we do about it? Pete can barely walk, and we're all exhausted. A floorboard creaked in the hallway. Sarah's hand moved to her Glock. Everything okay up there? Liam's voice carried from the darkness, pleasant but somehow wrong, like someone trying to remember how normal people talked. Need anything? Water, maybe? All clear, Jake called back. We're good. You sure? I could show you the rest of my supplies. Got some interesting things in the basement. A pause. Really interesting things. Sarah felt the hair rise on the back of her neck. There was an eagerness in his voice that hadn't been there before. We're fine, she said firmly. Get some rest, Liam. A soft laugh floated up from the darkness. Rest. Right. Sure. His footsteps retreated, accompanied by muttered words they couldn't make out. Silence fell again, broken only by the soft sounds of sleeping survivors and Liam's restless pacing in the rear of the house. Occasionally they heard him talking, his voice rising and falling in strange cadences. Sarah found herself hoping he was talking to the dog. The alternative was unsettling. She checked her watch. 6 more hours until dusk. 6 hours in which they would monitor their unusual situation and their strange host, or risk departing in broad daylight. She studied the street through the window, noting how exposed they'd be if they tried to move now. But staying meant spending more time with Liam, whose mask of normalcy seemed to be slipping with each passing hour. Get some rest, Jake said softly. I'll take first watch. We need you sharp when it's time to move. Sarah nodded, but kept her Glock close as she settled against the wall. In the darkness of the back rooms, Liam's footsteps continued their restless circuit. Sarah checked her watch in the dim light filtering through the boarded windows. 2:17 p.m. The afternoon sun tried to penetrate the makeshift barriers, creating strange patterns on the floor. Jake had finally agreed to get some rest an hour ago, though she knew if he was sleeping, it was a very light doze, and he still had one hand near his rifle. The others were scattered around the living room floor, sleeping. Even Maya had surrendered to her exhaustion, though her notebook remained clutched in one hand. The sound of Liam's footsteps had grown more erratic over the past hour, his pacing punctuated by bursts of whispered conversation with either himself or the dog. She'd been tracking him, noting how he seemed to grow more agitated with each circuit of the house. Now, Those steps approached the living room again, more purposeful this time.
Getting stuffy in here.
Liam's voice was friendly, but something in his tone set Sarah's teeth on edge. He emerged from the darkness of the hallway with Kaiser padding silently beside him.
Thought maybe we could chat. Been a while since I had civilized company.
Sweat beaded on his forehead, despite the autumn chill.
Sure,
Sarah said, her tone neutral.
Must get lonely out here.
Liam smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes.
Oh, I keep busy. Lots to do. Lots to prepare for.
He settled into a chair, his fingers drumming an irregular rhythm on the armrest.
Been watching that bastard Marcus and his man, the way they've taken over, treating people like cattle.
Sarah felt Jake shift slightly behind her. If he had been asleep, he wasn't now. The change in Liam's demeanor was subtle, but unmistakable, like a mask starting to slip.
You've had run-ins with them?
She asked, keeping her voice neutral.
You could say that.
Liam's fingers stopped their drumming, curling into a fist.
Seen what they do to people. The ones they catch. The ones they...
His voice cracked slightly, a tremor running through his body.
The ones they decide aren't useful.
Pete had woken at some point during the conversation. He sat up slowly, careful of his injured ankle.
What happened?
He asked quietly. Liam's head snapped toward him, the movement unnaturally quick. His carefully maintained facade fractured further.
What makes you think something happened?
The friendly tone was gone, replaced by something harder, darker.
You asking questions about me now?
Just making conversation,
Pete said.
No.
Liam stood abruptly, looming over them. Sunlight caught his face through a gap in the boards, highlighting the manic gleam in his eyes.
No, you're not. Maybe you're a spy for Marcus? Maybe all of you are.
No, we're not spies. We were running from Marcus, remember? It's why we crossed the bridge,
Sarah said softly, but her hand was already carefully moving toward her Glock.
Prove it.
Liam's voice rose sharply, making Devon stir in his sleep. Rebecca, now awake, pulled him closer, shielding him instinctively.
You can't, can you?
His breathing had grown ragged, and spittle flying from his lips.
Kaiser, guard!
The dog's posture changed instantly, a low growl rumbling in its throat as it moved to block the hallway. Maya was awake now, her eyes wide as she carefully reached for her notebook, always observing, always learning, even in moments of crisis.
You're right to be wary,
Jake said, sitting up slowly, his voice steady and calm. Marcus needs to be stopped, but right now, we all need to stay calm.
Calm?
Liam laughed, the sound like breaking glass.
Oh, I'm calm. I'm so very calm. Been calm for days, watching, waiting for them to send someone. And here you are.
His hand moved to his waist, and Sarah saw the glint of a knife.
Liam.
Pete started to rise, wincing as he put weight on his ankle.
Maybe we should... Shut up!
The knife came up, pointing at Pete. Sunlight caught the blade, sending reflections dancing across the walls.
I know what you're thinking. All of you. You think I'm easy pickings, huh? You think you can take over my stronghold, don't you? Raid my supplies. Well, you misjudged the situation and walked into my trap.
Kaiser's growl grew louder, and Sarah realized with horrible clarity that the dog wasn't just trained. It was a weapon, honed by Liam, long before the EMP attack. It was clear now the attack on Devon hadn't been random at all. It had been a ruse, set up by Liam to engineer this exact situation.
Look, you invited us into your home, said Sarah. It's cool, though.
We can go. Right now, and we'll be out of your hair. Nobody's going anywhere, Liam said, his voice suddenly calm again, though his eyes burned with a fevered light. He moved to the center of the room, positioning himself where he could see everyone. You think I'm dumb enough to let you go, so you can tell your boss my exact location? No. There's only one way this ends. You women will stay with me, but the men, well, I'm sorry, but you'll be leaving, one way or another. The knife gleamed as he shifted his grip, the blade catching another shaft of afternoon sunlight. Kaiser maintained perfect position at the hallway, waiting for commands that Sarah knew would come in an instant if anyone moved wrong. In the tense silence, she could hear Devon's frightened breathing, see Jake's finger tightening imperceptibly on his rifle's trigger, feel the weight of the Glock against her hip. One wrong move, and everything would explode. The end of Episode 4, On the Move. Written by Scott Medbury. Narrated by Adam Barr.
If you're enjoying Scott's audiobook content, please like and subscribe. It's the best way to help out the channel.